This is amazing. So Matt, I'm going out to lunch, and Michael is stalking where I'm going. I've chosen my food. Yeah, I do. I like to go for the dessert first. If I don't get a cheesecake, my mother's very disappointed. So I have to take pictures of cheesecake and send to her. So it's
okay. It's somewhere between Harlow and Chelmsford. I've been there.
Yeah, Essex boy.
I've got a cousin in Chelmsford.
I've
been everywhere, man.
So you actually been to that pub?
No.
Oh, too literal. Hello and welcome to the Full Stop Podcast, a childless community podcast with Michael Hughes, Berenice Smith and me, Sarah Lawrence. If you're new to this podcast, we're here to delve beneath the surface of the childless identity, to cover what's going on in the wider community and to look at the topics that really affect us. Our goal is to help and support those of you out in the community by sharing the stories and the voices that make up our narrative so that you too can begin to find yours. We also aim to inform and educate those who aren't members of our community so that they can begin to understand and support those people in their lives who are facing a life without children. In this episode, we're joined by members of the Full Stop online community to celebrate our 5th birthday. We wanted to celebrate and give people the chance to ask us the questions they had about us, the Full Stop, and what it's like to have a podcast that has stayed the course. This is a different type of episode for us. We had the tables turned on us and we were asked numerous different questions, which of course were all unscripted. This meant we had no idea what we would be asked. We covered a vast array of topics, including our unique insight into what motivates us to keep the podcast going and to actually start and run an online community. So sit back, relax and enjoy this episode all about how we have run the podcast and how we are celebrating our 5th anniversary.
And we've got a competition to honour this and to celebrate with you. You can win a signed copy of Save Me From the Waves by Jessica Hepburn, some biscuity goodness from the kitchen, thank you Caroline for supporting us, and a whole year of membership for anyone who identifies as childless not by choice in our Full Stop online community. To enter, you need to answer this question. In 2022, we had a guest who told us to struggle well. And we'd like to know, who was that? To tell us, you need to head to our website, www.thefullstoppod.com, look for the pop-up and enter the competition, and the closing date is the end of May. We will also be publishing on social media and you will find posts with the competition on there, and you can reply to us by direct message to any of those, and whilst you're there, give us a like and say hello, and you can wish us a happy birthday if you'd like to as well. We'd love to hear from you. The full terms and conditions will be published on our website, and the closing date will be the last day in May, and we'll give you a shout out on our next episode. Good luck. And good morning to you all. Janine, Catherine, Charlotte, Jane. Jane with Kat and Elaine. You can see the cat. That window's not open, is it?
It's not.
Don't touch it. Air. Okay. All right. And Vicky is here as well. How lovely. What a brilliant full house. Thank you so much. So this is, we've termed it a community takeover. So that basically means that the three of us are here in the hot seat, really, because normally we are interviewing everybody else and we ask the questions. So this is your chance to ask us a question, to share anything with us, put us on the hot seat. You can ask all three of us, you can ask one of us, two of us, we don't mind at all. Anything you would like to know about us, the Full Stop, any questions on your mind or anything you would like to share with us, and it would be in the will be in the episode. And if you want us to read it out, you prefer not to be on the audio, then pop it in the chat and we will pick it up from the chat. So whatever works and however you feel comfortable. Happy birthday, guys!
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh,
I can't believe it's bloody 5 years. 5
Well
years.
done. Yeah, it's a long time. Well done.
And we're all still
5 years.
talking to each other.
Am I talking to you this week? Yeah, maybe I am. I might do this week. It's all right.
no, it's crazy to see. It has been 5 years, though, isn't it? I mean, something that was just put together on the back of a fag packet. Sorry, for our American friends, cigarette packet. It's.
I heard it was a napkin.
Was it a napkin?
It was being honest now. A cigarette packet.
It definitely was a post-it note. I do remember writing something down on a post-it note because I was listening to the Big C, and they announced it on that recording, and then went and spoke to Sarah. I think I spoke to Sarah first. I
can't remember.
Lost in the midst of time. 5 years ago is a lot. 5 weeks ago is a long time. Never mind 5 days. But also continually doing this. So lots of podcasts are seasonal. So they work in seasons of say like 10 episodes or something, and then take a break. But we decided madly. I don't think we knew, did we, that you could do seasonal podcasts. I think we just kept going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As topics came up, we just sort of addressed them, and here we are.
But it feels a longer 5 years because we had the pandemic. So I think that changed that 5 year period so much, more.
That was tough on that one, actually, because we had to sit and think about what to do. I can remember thinking, well, I don't know, I think we kept recording because it was something like you fixate on it and go, okay, I can, this is a thing that turns up every month, when everything else was going completely wrong in the world and nothing was regular. I don't know about you two, Michael, Sarah, did you find that it was kind of like something we could kind of, you knew that was going to happen each month?
I had a discussion about this with someone the other day where they were talking about COVID and how a lot of people found it tough. And it really wasn't too much about the ordinary for us. I mean, no one comes to us anyway. And so, the podcast was just like keeping it normal. Pretty well for me, for us, it was.
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I didn't really struggle with it. I'm a raging introvert, and I quite enjoyed the pressing pause and having other things to think about. So podcast was great. I think we tried videos, didn't we, at that point? Live videos for a bit. But actually I think the thing that did come out of it was that episode that we did about being single during the pandemic.
Yeah.
You talked about it the other week, didn't you, Bernice? The lady that talked about being out on the veranda of her flat and everybody else was with somebody and she was on her own. That stayed with me, I think.
Yeah, that really hit me hard. That kind of really made me think, God, this does impact so much more on our community. It did anyway, didn't it? I think we were all sort of aware of how vulnerable we were because of, I think, care, all those things around caring for each other and not having, I guess it put everybody in that same position, I suppose. It leveled things up because people couldn't see their children, couldn't see their parents, couldn't see. So we were all similarly kind of like stuck. So I guess in some ways it sort of made everyone in a similar thing. The only thing I think that was the biggest thing challenge for me was sort of things like homeschooling and having lots of places that were previously safe and having kids on calls, things like that. And that's kind of where I think the podcast became somewhere I could go, okay, I'm on Zoom and this space is safe. There's lots of places online didn't feel safe because of those intrusions and that sort of throwing yourself into things. But I think it's the routine, but also having to adjust the podcast during that time and think, what are we? Things we were planned to talk about, we couldn't talk about because they weren't necessarily relevant. And I think, yes, that single and childless, and particularly for me, that standout of Julie's words more than probably anything else at that time. I think that was a real turning point, I think, in how a podcast can respond much quicker than most things, because it's, and particularly I think for us, because we didn't take a break and we just kept going and going and going. And maybe that was why we kept going and going and didn't think about seasons, because actually it was 2019 we did the podcast, we started doing it, and then by the time I think we thought about a break, it was suddenly we were being thrown into things like lockdowns in 2020, and you just keep going because you think there's a need for this, and we can respond and be company for people when they might just need something just safe to listen to, that doesn't kind of, we didn't sort of focus on COVID particularly, or the pandemic, but we kept talking about things, but we're obviously all aware of that in the back of our minds, that we had to adjust the content that we were recording at the time.
Also, we got a lot of testimonials back around that time as well, and I think that sort of we were just wow, oh, okay, people are listening, and it is making a difference. So that spurred us on as well, I think, too.
Yeah, definitely did. Is there any questions anyone's got, Chris? Anything you want to ask us?
I've got one. I was thinking before this of what the Full Stop podcast has given to me. And it's given me a place where I can turn up and be me. I'm allowed to be involved as much as I want to. I don't feel pressured in any way. It's a place I don't feel the odd one out. And the conversations you've had with various people through the 5 years have allowed me to open up my mind and think kinder about myself in the situation I'm in. So the podcast has given me a lot of things. So I wanted to ask each of you, what's the podcast given to you?
I'm going to cry at this one, I know. Berenice, Sarah, would you like to go first? What are you?
I'm now thinking we should have had these in advance. Damn it.
That is a
really
good question, Jane. That is a fabulous question. And it really puts us on the spot, which is kind of what I think we were hoping for today.
Do you know, I think for me, it's given me a lot of healing. I think I listen back very occasionally, not very often, to like the early episodes, and I realised how angry I was at being childless. It sounds dreadful because I love this community, but I really didn't want to be in this community at all. You know, there was a real part of me that actually was, really pissed off that I had to be different again. And I think for me, it's kind of wanting to heal, but not being sure how to. I've done lots of therapy. I'm a therapist as well, but I think that community, finding somewhere where you rightly say, being part of something that you don't feel like the odd one out, was a gift, but also very hard to accept. I think now I don't think I'm angry at all now, and I've loved listening to everybody else's point of view, because there's always something that you chime with. Even when we've done episodes that we have been, I don't know, felt really uncomfortable about, not in a nasty way, but we haven't got enough experience to talk about this, like the Black Lives Matter one, the sex one as well. We keep talking about going back to it, and I'm really aware we haven't, because you can hear the awkwardness at the beginning, can't you? Going, but actually, I think talking about all those different things has been a real privilege as well, and it's really helped to open my eyes up to the diversity in the community as well. So it's been a real gift for me.
You're just going to wait for me to talk now, aren't you, Mr. Hughes?
He's going.
Yeah, I can tell.
I'm happy to go now if you want me to.
You wanna? Because I'm still thinking. I might just go what you two said, but I won't. I will give Jane an honest answer, because yes, definitely.
Okay. I will not get through this without crying. Good job, we can cut it out. But I know I've said it a lot of times before, but what So you can see how hard this is going to be for me. There is really something beautiful about this community, because we've all been through our shit, and from that, as much as we never wanted to, I don't think I could think of a more empathetic place to be. Yeah, a more empathetic place to be than within this community, because I was saying to someone the other day that it is palpable. You can feel it. And so what it's done for me is I shared something on social media the other day, and what sparked it was a question I always ask myself about what is a good life. Not to be compared with, this is not about living my best life, and it's not that at all. It's like living a good life. And I think I can say absolutely that being part of this community, being part of this podcast, and just listening to the voices that we've heard so far has made me a better man. So I need to thank you all for that. That's where I'm going to stop.
I wanted to kind of say sort of what they said, because I think that's all very true, that I couldn't summarise it better than Sarah and Michael. But I'm going to add on a personal note, which is about courage and inclusion, both things that I think I've struggled with. When you've got a name like mine, you don't tend to fit in very much. It always stands out. And I've said, I think, to Michael and Sarah before, that I've always found it takes up space in the room. And I'm an introvert like Sarah. I don't do kind of gatherings very well. I'm not particularly good at putting myself on the line. And it's hard sometimes. Lots of things are quite difficult. And I've always been the backroom person. So at the start of World Childless Week, when Steph wanted a website, yeah, I can do that. But I didn't want to be out there doing that. That's not my thing. And I guess also walking our shoes wasn't me. It was everybody else's stories. It's a meanness to telling a story. It wasn't my story as such. And I think I was also, too angry. Really angry and aggrieved at being part of something. And I think just not really addressing probably the trauma as well of what I've been through. And many of us kind of don't want to talk about that. And I guess the podcast is so, what I've come to realize is how many people know quite a lot about me because of the podcast, but I don't know much about them. And I found that when I went to different things we've been to, and I think also particularly with Jessica's Save Me From the Waves book launch. And I was sort of thinking, oh, crikey. And I felt quite responsible because the podcast was there. And it was a bit alarming, I have to say as well. But what I found was there was just so much love, I think, there too for what we do, which you never quite know how these things land. And that felt like it was it's courageous of me to do that. And I'm not quite sure why I'm still here. I find that always, every time, it challenges me and gives me pause for thought. Am I doing the right thing? I'm terrible with confidence. I'm awful at it. I'm such an introvert. I'm learning to be brave because of the people I'm surrounded by, because of our online community. You make me braver. Every listener, every bit of feedback, and particularly Michael and Sarah, make me braver and just push me a little bit more to do things. And I can't thank them enough. And I'm getting very tearful. So I'm going to stop as well, because I find it, I don't want to be here, but we're here. And my goodness me, I feel so very loved. And I hope that all of you know how very much loved you are as well, for being part of the story of the podcast. You are very, very loved. Ooh.
I think we started a book about who would cry first. I think I know we would have got it right, wouldn't we? Bless you, Michael. I love it that you cry. I think it's such a nice thing. It gives everyone else the green light to do it as well.
Well, I think that's that another part of this is that I feel okay about doing it. I know I joke about cutting it out, but I hardly ever do.
Oh, goodness me, crikey. I think, was it the bets on stage at Story House, and I was the one that went first.
Yeah, that's true.
I wasn't expecting that to happen. I was like, oh, well, there you are. I tell you what is interesting, though, just on that thing about crying and stuff, is that actually I think with the laughter as well, there's actually been far much more laughter than I ever thought would be possible, talking about something that nothing ever we never wanted this to happen to us, and we don't want to be doing a podcast on this at all. And that actually I think every episode there's been all sorts of laughter. There's been the awkward laughter on the sex one, lots of awkward laughter, but actually at the end of the day it's the laughter, and I think that, and all the emotions in between, and particularly the tears as well, that make it so human. I think that's the great thing about kind of like podcasting, isn't it? It's the authentic. You can't hide a lot in a voice, can you? Absolutely could, but you can't. Jane, that is the most brilliant question. Thank you. I loved it, and you really made me think about it made all three of us, I think about an answer. Did we answer it in the way that you was that all right as an answer?
Yeah, it just is. Thank you for your honest answers, and it's everything that each of you mentions resonated with me. So we all come into this community in different avenues, but we all have the shared experience. Some to a lesser degree than others, but it's that inclusivity is what we've all feel the same shit.
Yeah. And
we all kind of react in our different levels of how we react to it. So it just encompasses what this podcast is all about. And I'm so glad I'm here. And I wish I'd come earlier. I wish I'd found you 5 years ago, because I was a late starter, but I'm catching up.
But you've got loads of episodes to listen to. I mean,
exactly.
It's not like there's a shortage.
I'm so very lucky in that, you see. I have loads to watch.
It's like kind of like, thank you so very much. That means the world to us, because I think sometimes it's quite hard to sort of know how the podcast lands. You know, people listen, and in the testimonials are fantastic when we get them. We don't get that many, actually. It's always nice to have them. But it's been the biggest change, I think, probably as well, with the online communities, that we actually have conversations now about what we do, and that is always good for us too. We understand, I think, a bit more about where it lands, what we do, and that's always a nice thing too. We're not just going out in one direction.
You're doing grand, keep going, and I look forward to the 10th anniversary.
Crikey.
No pressure.
No pressure.
See you there.
God. Hello, Full Stop team. This is Sam Hill. Thank you so much for all you do. Here's my question. What do you feel has been the biggest development in the childless community in the 5 years you've been doing the podcast? And what would you like to see happen in the next 5 years?
That's a great question, Sam. I think for me, it comes in a couple of different ways, what I've seen over the last 5 years. And one of them is more people are visible. And the more childless people are visible, the better it will be for us all, in that we can grab hold of that term childless and dictate what the narrative is. We decide what it is. We craft the meaning of it. And also, I think there's more men visible now, which is great, because we're having a hard time determining what our vocabulary is around how we feel about being childless, what it means for us. But the more men that are visible, the more discussions that are being had, the better we will be, and be able to craft what it means to be a childless man, but add that to the childless narrative. And so that's what I'd like to see in the next 5 years, is more of that. More people turning up who will be totally different from each other, which is great, because then you will find someone that chimes with you. And together, we again craft that narrative of what it means to be childless. And we tell the world what it is. We don't let people assume.
Hi, Sam. Thank you so much for your question. It's a really good one. So I think the biggest development that I've seen in the last 5 years for our community has been the sheer diversity of the communities within the community, if that makes sense, the clubs, the groups, the connections over different things other than just grief. I think when I first joined the community, and actual fact, when we first started the podcast, it felt that there wasn't that much diversity out there. There were people connecting over their grief, and you had World Childless Week, you had Gateway, but there wasn't really sort of things like book clubs, there wasn't really things like meditation, choirs, and I've really seen a growth in those areas as we've got to our 5th birthday. And I think actually it's a real mark of our evolution as a community that we now have lots of different groups, lots of different interests cropping up that actually make the childless experience more varied, I guess, and give space for people that are coming out of that first flush of grief into working out who they are and what their identity is. It's something I've touched on in the episode, but I think the fact that we're evolving and we're coming up with these spaces that are childless but that are actually connecting over books, singing, expressions, even men's groups. I think it's a big deal actually that we are acknowledging the diversity within our community. So I think that's the biggest difference I've seen. And I think for the next 5 years, I think I touched on this in the episode, but I think for us it's that continuing evolution. For me, I think there is space for us to start going out into the wider community and starting to really evolve beyond our safe space and like taking up room, taking up a place at the table. Whether that's through activism, whether that's social, political, economic. It just, for me, I think actually there's going to be a real growth in the next 5 years of people wanting to do that bigger picture stuff. I know certainly my own experience working in the therapy world, that's been a growth area, but I also now think that actually from my own evolution point of view, doing the end of life doula course, and seeing my own evolution and wanting to make that bigger change, I think more and more of us are going to do that, and more of us are going to be more vocal. And actually, I'm all for it. I'm actually really excited for it. But yeah, great question. Thank you so much.
Hi, Sam. Thank you for your fabulous question. For me, I think the change that I've seen has been that childlessness is spoken about more, that it's a conversation or a word that's been used more often on different platforms, that usually there's someone doing something on a platform around it and there's a chance and opportunity to collaborate and to join in with those conversations. That if there's really overt pronatalism, then there's usually one person, one brave soul, if not several, saying, actually, hang on a minute, you're really actually pissing us off here. We have a place here at the table too. So I think we're becoming stronger in that. I also think as well that there's been tentatively, slowly, more conversation outside of childless women. And I'd like to think that we've done our part with that. And that would be my hope for the future. That people can be childless not by choice for any reason, and that within childlessness there's an awful lot of diversity, and I'd like to think that we and others can embrace that and bring all the conversations around childlessness to the table. I think that's really important, that people don't feel excluded because childless women are more vocal, which we are. I mean, goodness me, we're a force to be reckoned with, aren't we? But it would be nice to think that other people can feel included in those conversations as well. And I think the other thing, I'm going to give you another answer, because you asked 2 questions here, Sam, so I'm giving you 2 answers. and or 3 answers, in fact, now. And I think the other thing that I'd like to think is that there's more growth together, that there are so many people doing so many brilliant things, and we're all doing stuff here, there and everywhere. I would love to see us all form and come together at various points, not just Story House, but in other ways, across the year or across the months, in order to check in with each other. It's sometimes quite hard and quite isolating sometimes when you're running and doing something like this, and to check in and, you know, have that support, I think is really important. But also for empowerment and activism, and identify areas where perhaps we need to do more, and there's a thing over here, and we can share each other's talents and skills. There's some incredible people doing amazing things, and we're also very talented, that I think together we could be incredibly powerful. So that would be my other hope for the next 5 years, that there's a bit more activism and joining together so we can really make a difference. Thanks, Sam, for all your support and your kindness and friendship.
I was thinking about this yesterday, and it may overlap a bit with what Jane was saying, but I was looking at what the podcast has given me, and it's, well, beyond measure, really. I think Jessica's listened to every episode of Desert Island Discs. I've done every episode of the Full Stop podcast, and it's accompanied me on many a long car journey, for which I'm very, very grateful. And it's helped me so much to listen to all your stories and your vulnerabilities. It helped me in my deepest, darkest days to know that I was not the only one that's felt this. And I just really wondered, sharing your vulnerabilities, how that's made you feel. Has it helped you? Has it helped you heal? Has it given you more confidence? And has the starting of the new community has an impact on that as well?
It's another good question. Who wants to go first? Sarah, you went first last time.
That just leaves Michael there.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how this is going to land, but and I'm still trying to work this out for myself. But being a guy and being vulnerable really goes against the grain. It really does. I know I've spoken about this before, but I'm getting near 60, so I'm allowed to repeat myself now. I've probably said that before as well. That if I can go back a touch to when the what was that, fertility? No, More to Life in Scotland. When I did that interview, I've thought long and hard about showing vulnerability, because I think as a childless man, I know it's important. I know it's really important, but sometimes it's really hard to do. Look, I was brought up very independent, very, very independent, and everything was up to me, in that if I ever wanted things to happen, it was up to me. And it created this real, not drive, but independence and tenacity, I guess, to the point where, like if I was a kid and I got hurt, I'd never go home. I'd never get any empathy. I don't. If you don't, you come crying to me. Mm-hmm. I'll give you something to cry about. All those things that we heard, but it really, now I look at all that and it was very impactful to me, and so very independent. And then playing lots of rugby and, being praised for toughness, and then coming into this community and then trying to, I don't know, show vulnerability has changed me, in that I now see it as a superpower. And I know that might sound weird, but I feel so much stronger for actually being able to show vulnerability than I ever have. And so I've realised I've got to dial that back sometimes, because I sometimes think everyone else should feel the same. And of course, I may be further down a path of acceptance than some. And so did that make sense? It's given me a superpower. if there is such a thing.
Not sure how to follow that up. Like lots of things that you say, Michael. What do I think about it? Oh, I find it quite scary to show vulnerability in that sense, because it does feel, like I said, it's like go to events and people know quite a lot, but I found it also quite cathartic, I suppose, because I've had to sit and think about, I guess I kind of put everything that happened to me in a box, and literally physically in the box in the loft. It's still there, and also I think in my head as well, boxed it up, shoved it away, thought, no, I'll be all right, until I wasn't. And seriously, big time wasn't, as I think the earlier podcast episodes, I talk about how badly I wasn't all right. And I think the vulnerability in sharing my story, I hope, is that other people who arrive here for whatever reason know that it's okay to be vulnerable, but also to know to ask for help, or at least feel, to quote our own words, that they're not alone. Because I think at that moment, when I was at my most vulnerable, I felt utterly alone, devastatingly, horribly, frighteningly alone. And I guess in telling stories, I'm hoping that helps somebody else. Although it's been really, really hard to sort of to do that, I think. But it is weird. It is that odd thing of people knowing more, I think, and that can be quite a strange feeling, I think, as well. I also think too, sometimes it can make, I'd never would want anyone to think that stories, my healing, still ongoing, it's still work in progress, and still as messy as everybody else is, that there was any kind of elevation in that. I'm not sure I'm making sense here at all, but that kind of way that, we've got a podcast, it's the full stop, and we do this, and you've got to kind of like be part of something in terms of like a brand, I suppose. And I don't hope we haven't grown up so much that people don't feel that we're relatable anymore. That's always one of my worries, I suppose. But something's just necessary, and we have to kind of like do official things, I suppose, sometimes. But I guess it's, where am I going with this thought? I'm rambling off down some weird rabbit hole. I've no idea where I'm going. I guess it's kind of like making sure that we're still relatable and connecting as well, that my story is still honest and true, and I'm as messy as the next person. And I think the online community, back to your question you asked about that, is that it's less lonely. And I think also it's opening up, like the podcast has done, to all the different stories, all the different reasons why we're here. There's so many. I have this idea in my head, and that it's still taking shape, about some other kind of creative art form that I've got going on as a result of all of this. It'll come to fruition at some point, but it's around those vulnerabilities, and it's around the reasons that we're all here. And I think I'm learning every day from the conversations that we're having in our community. It's educational and eye-opening and life-affirming too. And I think that's what vulnerability for me is about. It's just making me less lonely, and I hope that it makes our listeners and all of our friends less lonely too.
I've really struggled with the vulnerability side of things. I think I had 10 years of therapy, so that it was okay for me to show feelings. I think much like Michael, my childhood was pretty much, you sort yourself out. Whatever happens, you've got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and crack on. There wasn't an awful lot of empathy in my household. So when it came to the childlessness, generally speaking, I felt completely fucked. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it. I thought I was on my own for a lot of it, to be honest. And I really struggled. You can kind of see it in my blog posts. Well, they were up. I've taken a lot of them down, but I'm republishing them, and I'm rereading them as I publish them. And I'm like, fucking hell. I really didn't know what was up and what was down. Such was my experience and all the stuff that I had to go through to get to childlessness. My story was pretty. I remember. So I did Gateway, I did the Reignite weekend, and I met up with one of the ladies afterwards, and she went, bloody hell, you've been through such a lot, haven't you? And it wasn't like top trumps, it was just the way she said it. And I started bawling. I was like, fucking hell, haven't I? Because nobody else had sort of said, Jesus, Sarah, fucking hell, because it was just one thing after another in very quick succession with my story. And I think the vulnerability, and I think it's kind of come as we've gone through the podcast. At the beginning, I was very angry, and that's my go-to, because I find it uncomfortable to be vulnerable. So I'd put my spikes on and, sort of bully my way through stuff. But it's come as I've been working on myself. It's become easier in some ways. Still hard. I still struggle to cry in public. I'm not going to lie. But actually, it comes easier to talk about my story, listen to other people's stories. I think being a counsellor has helped with that. Meeting somebody where they are. And I'll not lie. When I work with people, sometimes I tear up, and it's like you can see them going, "Oh, fuck, really? Is that bad?" And it's not that it's that bad. It's just it's offering that compassion and empathy to somebody else. And I think part of my vulnerability has been working with the community. Really, I love what I do. I love this podcast. I love listening to other people's stories. I like sharing a little bit, not too much. I'm not that big on sharing my shit, and I have to be boundaried because obviously I'm a counsellor now, so that I have this thing where I'm trying to work out how I fit into the Full Stop community, and we're working with that at the minute. So for those in there may have noticed that I've not been that present because I'm still trying to suss out how I turn up in there as a counsellor who has to be boundaried. So it's complicated, but I love it, and I love hearing what is a very empathic, supportive community. At Chester last year, I can't never mention Chester. I'd mention it a lot. Getting in a room with lots of people that are childless but also child-free, and sort of coming together, and the waves of emotion that went around the room. You could literally feel like this Mexican wave of emotion, and I found that very therapeutic and very healing. Jessica's speeches, you'll notice in the podcast, I go very quiet when Jessica's on because I just listen, because she is so, the way she speaks is just so straightforward, but very, very full of emotions, very open and vulnerable. And I can't get enough of that. Yeah, and love, absolutely spot on. So much love in that room. It was just, and I think that's part of being part of this community. We are, all of us, quite vulnerable, I think, because we all come to this space with a story, but knowing that we're going to be accepted, and I think that's fairly unique. So yeah, waffly, but that's where it is.
I love that observation as well that you just made there. Someone saying to you, you've been through a lot. And yeah, I think that's one of the things the podcast has sort of made me recognise, is that, yeah, I've been through a lot. Yeah, boxing it away and putting it into a cupboard and going, oh, yeah, I've done that. But actually, it stays with us as well. Yeah.
I think it does. I was a few people know this, but I'm trained to be a end-of-life doula. I was talking to somebody in the pub when I was up in Scotland saying, I'm going to be a death doula. And she went, deaf? My accent, of course, it's death. Yeah, deaf doula. No, death.
Pardon?
But it was an incredible piece of training, and the actual fact, and I won't name any names, but one of the trainers was childless, not by choice. How is that for synchronicity? And you know what? It actually meant we could bring it into the room. We could actually talk about it as though it was part of something natural. And there were people in there with children, but actually it became less of a thing. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've had, that we just happened to be in the same room at the same time talking about this experience. I was like, wow. And everyone else sort of sat back and listened. Sometimes we kind of get talked over. We get the nice, well-intentioned, have you thought about? None of that happened. It was brilliant. So I was like, fight the power.
That is amazing. I can't wait to see what comes of that, Sarah. I think that's incredible. I mentioned it to a couple of people because I know you told me about it, and there's always someone I know who's doing this. Wow. Yeah, I can say death, death. So they were like, death. But then I said it really quickly to somebody else and they said the same thing. What? It's amazing. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. Fantastic. And I guess that's probably maybe, is that a result, do you think, of kind of what you're doing here with the podcast and with After the Storm? And this seems like, to me, like a natural progression for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think the podcast has helped me heal in ways that I hadn't anticipated.
Yeah.
The counselling I love, but I think also the full stop, we talk about things that perhaps we don't like talking about as a community. Sex, heck, as we said in the episode, didn't we?
I think that was you, but yes. We went for Shirley Valentine, sex.
But I'd love to at some point in the future talk about aging, dying, and where we are with that as a community, because I personally am not comfortable with it, which is why I'm doing the training. I really struggle with what that looks like for me. And it was a steep learning curve in that room, talking about what I thought would be, a reasonable way to go. And so I think the podcast has given me the ability to lean into things that are actually really uncomfortable. I think, we put our hands up, don't we, and say, listen, we're three white, middle-class, coupled people. And what I love is that we invite people in that have different perspectives. And there will always be things that we don't know about. We all have our implicit bias. But, I love that we open it up and say, hey, what do you want to talk about? Is there something you want to come in and talk about that we might not have an awareness of? And I think, as Michael said, it opens you up, doesn't it? You become a better human being because you are open to learning from my perspective. Yeah.
Alliances, isn't it? I always call it allyship as well, because I think there is that in our community. We're all childless, not by choice, but we can build allyships within our community so that we learn about why other people are childless, not by choice. And to a degree, I think, as well, outside of the community as well. But there was that thing that I messaged you both about, sorry, digressing slightly, but I was reading something the other day about two guys, and they happened to meet because one of them past the other, and he was sitting on the edge of Waterloo Bridge in London, and he stopped and thought, that's not right, and he just asked him what's going on with him, and they talked him back. He's just a guy going to work. And actually, going back to what you said, Michael, about compartmentalizing, one of the themes in the articles about the guy, he'd talked this guy off the edge of the bridge, and then he just carried on going to work, and he mentioned it to his wife when he got home. That was it, and he boxed it up. But to cut a very, very long story short, they talk about this. They've actually done events about this. And the bit that gets the audience is not the guy, well, obviously the guy who survived and his mental health problems, but it's the guy who talked him off the edge. People want to know, how did you do it? And what he says is he's an ally to people like that. He's learned from his situation, from the stories about allyship, and that's a really extreme version of allyship, but it's the fact that the audience, when they go on these things and they talk about this story and how they're still, after 20 years, they're still friends, because of one thing that happened, just this one event that happened to both of them. But it's the guy who had the conversation, because everybody wants to know, what would I do in that situation? And I think that whole idea of allyship, and we don't know everyone's story. We couldn't possibly begin to know what it's like for everybody, but the podcast means, and the online community means, that we can open up spaces for people to tell their story so that other people can be allies to that story. I would love it that we have people out there, and I think we, if you're listening and you are a parent listening to this, or you're child free and listening to this episode or any of the podcast episodes, and you go, okay, yeah, that chimes with me, or you have learned something and go, okay, now I know how to talk to a friend of mine because they are childless, or what to listen out for when they're struggling, or just to sit and listen and you've learned something from what we've said, then I think that for us is really powerful to hear, because that's allyship in a different way. We're not just forming alliances within our community, but we're also hopefully saying to people who don't identify as childless, not by choice, this is how you can support us better. I think that is a really important part. It's an important part of my kind of training in EDIB, inclusion training has been about, I don't identify as LGBTQIA, but actually I can be a blooming good allyship within that. There's a lot of allyship that can be happening within that space, and I know lots of people who do identify, and I think that that's really important, to be a good friend and a cheerleader for people like that, because we experience exclusion in a different way.
Hello, this is Catherine Emmanuel from Femmes Sans Enfants. I wanted to know which one of the interviews you did was the most touching one since you started. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you for sending in your question, Catherine Emmanuel. I really do think the one that was most impactful for me, but there's three. Sorry, I can't put it down to one. There's three.
Cheat.
The very first one was the Black Lives Matter episode that we did. That was confronting for me, because I've never seen myself as someone who, I don't want to say enables racism, but the women on that challenged my way of thinking, saying, well, look, if you don't call it out, then what kind of friend are you? So that was really challenging. The next one was actually the single one with Elaine and Penny, because that really gave me a really good insight into another way of being, which has sat with me now and will continue to sit with me. And the third one, it was the one, why is no one talking about childless men? That's another one. Because, I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about that. And so I don't go around a rabbit hole. I'll just stop there and give someone else a turn.
I was going to say, I'd be amazed if one of the men's episodes wasn't in your top three, because that is your passion, isn't it? So.
Yeah, well, that one, I don't why I think it might be a little bit nervous, but yeah, that one was important because I've got this bee in my bonnet that, as I spoke on that episode, it's frustrating me that no one's talking about childless men, even though we are in the same space.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for your question and for being a supporter of the Full Stop. It's so much appreciated, and thank you for all you do as well. I can't pick out one episode. That's not a good answer, is it? That's not a great start to this, is it? Because they're all good and everyone brings a different emotion to every episode and a different story. So I'm going to settle on the very first podcast that we did when we were all nervous. We didn't actually know each other that well. We were all a bit worried about, are we allowed to swear? What do we do? What happens next? Where does this thing go? And what on earth are we talking about? And you can hear it in our voices, but I can also hear hope. And that episode for me is one that I return to probably more than any of the others, because on the days when we get wobbles, because we get wobbles like everybody else does, it's a good marker. I can go back to it and go, okay, yeah, that's where we were, and this is where we are now, and these are all the things that have happened, and we're still going. And I think it's really important to even keep all of the stuff that went a bit wrong as well. We talk in the episode about things that didn't quite work out the way that they should do, and to know that happened, and to be human and authentic as well. So I hope that's a good answer to your question. Thank you so much for being our friend, and big part of our podcast story. Thank you, Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. Great question. So when I think back to all of the episodes that we've done, there have been a few that have actually been really touching, but I think some of the ones that have stayed with me the longest have been the ones where we've had people on who are talking about their lived experience. The one in particular I think about that really did touch me the most was the step parenting episode, which I think we did last year. And we had Lisa and Ken on as guests. And the thing that really touched me was it wasn't so much what they said, but it was actually the impact of coming on to talk to us about their step parenting experiences, and the fact that Lisa was recording it in her car because she, it's plain and simply, she was unable to speak openly for fear of obviously causing harm or hurt to other people in what is her family unit. But in order to be able to be open and honest, it was she did it from her car, which really struck me as a huge deal, actually, that she wasn't able to be open and honest in her own home. And then Ken as well. Ken spoke very openly around his experiences, and you could really feel the pain as he spoke about it, and the degrees of separation, I guess, in being a childless step parent. I mean, obviously we were aware that there are step parents within our community, but actually I think it's one of those topics that doesn't really get talked about. So to have two guests come on with lived experience and really speak so passionately and so openly and honestly about their experience, that really stayed with me for quite a long time. It gave me a new appreciation for the fact that, my home is safe and I can be honest about my experience, whereas, having a child in your home would be very triggering. So yeah, that really stayed with me, that episode.
Can I ask my question, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course.
Go for it.
Hey.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I want to say congratulations, of course. Incredible milestone, amazing achievement. You all, three of you, richly deserve to be incredibly proud of yourselves. My question is I think it's kind of a general one, and maybe it seems a little simple, but I was just wondering, as podcasters, what over the last 5 years would you say was the most enjoyable aspect of podcasting and or the most interesting?
Brilliant question.
I think the general simple ones sometimes are the best because they work best with with the way I think. So I thought I'd just leave it. You can say enjoyable or interesting or both or just one, whatever comes to mind, the light bulb moment that you get from that question.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm trying to think.
And I don't have to go first.
No, I think it's me. The most enjoyable part, I think, has been the fact that it's a team. I think for me, everything else that I've done has been kind of solo, I suppose. So enjoyable has been the fact that there's three of us. So we always keep each other going. So when there is a challenge, something doesn't work or whatever, I'm quite a perfectionist. And what I've learned from all of this is that it can be rough around the edges. We don't have the best recording equipment, but what we have are the best stories, and that the content that we share is the most important thing, more than anything else. I will spend hours trying to get the flipping, don't even talk about the transcripts. No, don't go down that one, Berenice, my God, very annoying. Because they just come out so badly. My name is spelled a different way depending on everyone's accents, and I have to go through and find my name and replace it every time, and goodness knows what else. It's just a nightmare anyway. So I think I'm having to let go of some of those perfections and just go, okay, we get this thing out. There is a lot to do, more than I ever thought there would ever be. It is all enjoyable because I feel like each month it's something different that we do. It's never boring. This is the thing, you think, oh, was another podcast, and I would, if I'm going to be honest, completely honest, to say that sometimes launching the podcast can be like, oh, click, 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 and there's a routine to it, and I have to go through and I just tick everything off to the point that if I don't tick it all off properly, then I always forget something. I wake up at 1 a.m. on the night after I've launched it and go, did I put it on Podbean? That's always my thing, which is a bit that goes out to everywhere. So if it doesn't go on that, it doesn't go to Spotify, Apple, or anything. And I have missed it once, and I was just like at 1 a.m. in my pajamas trying to remember the password to get in to put the thing on because I've forgotten them. I just checked and I hadn't done it. So that happened. So I've learned that. And I guess probably the other enjoyable, that's not so enjoyable, but the other enjoyable aspect is actually kind of creating it, because I've never ever done branding for a podcast before. I've still got stuff that I need to do, Busman's Holiday and all that, but it's exciting to see how that all works. And there is sort of thoughts in my head at the moment around the accessibility of our design, because accessibility and making sure that we don't exclude anyone through the way the podcast is presented is very important to me. And I'm still learning, doing lots of learning about accessible design at the moment. So there's things that another ongoing conversation to have with Michael and Sarah over that, and probably in the online community too. So that's been nice too. But most of all, the most enjoyable part has been that we aren't alone, because there's 3 of us, and that is just really empowering and enriching to my life. I've gone silent.
I was like, I finished.
I was with the silence there, you see, because that's like, like my coaching. Yes, it's comfortableness of the silence.
No, I thought, I think you do all the branding and everything, so you get very I think it's good to have the 3 of us, because we've got such different interests, haven't we? I would not want to do the branding. I would not want to do the tech stuff. So thank God we've got you. But
we all bring something different.
Yeah.
We all have talents, and you can pull into that, and I think that's a really lovely thing. And I think also if we start going off on a rabbit hole, the other 2 can go, no, we're not going down that one, let's go down this one, because that's the more important one, and that we actually listen to each other as well. I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think since we set up the CIC, it's got a lot more adult, hasn't it? I think it's not in that sense, but in the sense that we've had to put our adult pants on and start having some very serious conversations, haven't we, about what we want and where we want it to go. And I think for me, that's the interesting thing. I love the podcast. I love booking the guests, is always fun. And I think we've got some big plans coming up in terms of taking it a step further, so that we're not talking to ourselves. That's not what I mean. That makes it sound like we're not really impactful, but taking it out to the wider community and helping people understand why we've got a community and what it is to be childlessness in a very pronatalist wider community. And I think that's kind of where we want to go in terms of inviting on guests that may sit outside the community to talk about things and bring in some challenges, and obviously we get the opportunity then to challenge them and perhaps their perceptions. Like with the loneliness, we've sort of talked to 2 researchers that research us, but actually in the future what I'd like to do is bring in bigger organisations, charities, and say, hey, listen, why are you not catering for us? What is it about us that you are not seeing? And I think part of that is Michael's view. Well, I guess your goal, Michael, isn't it? You said you wanted us to be like activists. And I think actually that's kind of what we need to do if we're going to start saying, listen, we need our place at the table. We can't keep asking. We're going to have to start demanding. And that means that we're going to have some guests in that are going to be challenged, I think, by us. And we may be challenged by them, but I think it's going to be an adult conversation. And that's what keeps me going and why I love booking the guests, because I think where we came from, and we did an awful lot of books, authors. You can hear how tentative we were and how kind of nervous. almost apologetic. Oh no, would you mind awfully coming on our podcast? Whereas now, we're kind of like, well, no, come on our podcast. We want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. And I think that's why we've been going 5 years, because we've kind of evolved and grown. And I think the community helps give us that grounding, because people will talk about things in the community and they will say, listen, I want to know more about this. And it's like, yeah, great, let's do it. I'm really excited that actually we've got the community, albeit I don't quite know my place in it yet. But actually, I love the fact that we've got this space where people aren't necessarily in the first flush of grief. They're starting to be curious. They're starting to go, where do I fit? What do I want from life? And so we're starting to talk about those bigger topics, not just in the podcast, but as a community as a whole. And I think in that there is a sense of evolution, I think, for us, and finding our place and standing up and demanding to be seen and noticed. And I'm all for it. As you can probably tell, I'm quite passionate about it. But yeah, that's what I find interesting.
For me, it has, many layers. Obviously, there's the tech stuff. So, funny story. Sorry, got a story. My job takes me around Australia, and I have to do inspections of sites every 4 years. And I am now 53 and 3 months, which means 57 and 3 months. Sorry. Yeah, got that wrong. Which means in less than 3 years, I can retire. And when I used to visit sites, I would say, I'll see you in 4 years' time, back in 4 years' time. Now I'm going, hopefully you're never going to see me again, because I'm going to retire. And where I'm getting to is the first thing they say is, what are you going to do? And I just sort of laughed to myself, go, if you only knew. Which does actually then allow me to talk about the podcast. So yes, there is a little bit of manipulation, could you say, of the conversation, but it's what it does for me, though, is it really cements that I see this going on forever. Well, not forever, until I lose my marbles, I guess. But and so I'm really excited about the future. I'm really excited about all the things I'm going to learn, because I've learned so much already, both from a tech side, both from what I talked about earlier, and yeah, it's and then watching what else other people are doing and sort of having an understanding. So one of the things I thought about when you asked that question, Catherine, was, look, how do single people do a podcast that they can't rely on anyone else? There's a lot. Imagine if we had to produce this podcast and there was only one of us doing it. So I couldn't imagine it. So being part of a team is great. I've always been part of a team for all my working life, and led teams in various guises. So yeah, I'm really excited about that, and the future and learning new skills.
Thought about doing a podcast on my own about design, because I could sit and talk about design forever. I could nerd out, but I need someone to do like nerd stopping, preventative nerding.
Nerd stopping? What's that? Stop.
Well, stop nerding about fonts, you weird person. Don't talk about ampersands and interrobands in such a big way. But that's probably not a wise idea. So maybe that's not a good thing.
Can I just say that you both, all three of you, answered that so brilliantly, that I've learned so much about all three of you from your answers, and also just generally speaking. I've just learned so much. So thank you. You have answered that just fantastically.
Thank you. It was a really good question, because it made us think a bit too. From the practical side, and from the I guess, the humanity, the humanitarian side, I suppose, as well, those relationships as well, because it was a big chance, I'd met
your aspirations, your aspirations as well as what you reflections, and then your aspirations, and where you are in the moment of what you actually really enjoy and is very tangible. That was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, because I think probably this time, well, not this time last year, but I think probably the infamous Christmas episode. Which one was that? That wasn't the Christmas
one before last, I think.
Yeah, and I think you started the question, Michael, with, "Are you feeling festive?" And we went, "No." And we actually had to re-record it. I don't think we've ever done that, and it was just the three of us. Thankfully, no guests. But we re-recorded it. We stopped it and said no. Well, no, we recorded it, and then we all went away for a bit, and then we all went on to and messaged each other and went, "We cannot release that." That was just so awful. I think, Sarah, you were the most honest and said first. And then the two of us were like, "Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a bit, yeah." And we've never done that. And I think we just hit, I don't know about you two, but I think we'd hit like a low when it got exhausting. And I think we'd run out of stuff. And we'd had in our minds for a while that we wanted to do the CIC because we needed to be legal trading and things, because if you want to do other stuff, then we need to be legal with bank accounts and ownership and things like that. As soon as money starts changing hands, that becomes a whole ethical legal thing. And we've been waiting and haven't got very far at all. So I think probably the saviour of last year, I kind of want to just give a mention, I don't know that you listened, but to Daniel the accountant, because actually I think without his speedy manoeuvrings, I think it would have been quite hard for us to have seen a future. We just didn't know where to go, and there was lots of stuff around where we all live, because two of us obviously are in the UK, Michael is in Australia. All those sorts of things were just overwhelming and complicated. Plus we were having to come up with stuff with the podcast, and business as usual is quite hard when you've got these worries going on in the background. And I think just what you've just said there, Sarah, activism and Michael's goal of activism and how the three of us bring that in as well. It's always something that I remember and keep in my mind on the times when sometimes it can be a struggle. It's not always easy to do the podcast. It can be difficult, to be completely honest about that. But it's stuff around us that keeps us going as well. And it goes back to that teamwork again and the community. But yeah, that Christmas episode that never got released is dire. I hope you've dumped the audio, Michael, because I'd hate for that to come out.
I've got them all of them.
Yeah, genuinely.
We'll do a bloopers reel one day, but I don't fancy going through 60 hours of.
Have you genuinely kept them all?
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
Oh God.
So I may not, but so I've talked a lot recently about like cleaning out Mum's place and about how they were hoarding and all that sort of stuff, and it took us forever. If there is an electronic equivalent, I might be that person.
Right.
So I've got. Okay. I keep every photograph I've ever taken since. You could, since an Android could put photos on the cloud. So I can go back to 2003 for actual electronic photos. And I'm even now doing, and it's a family thing, I'm photographing old photos so I can put those on my cloud. Every podcast episode I've got, it's all sitting there in a file, but we can't put it on our shared drive because it's just too big.
So you've literally got a recording of that first ever episode then?
Yeah.
That we put out.
Yeah.
Have you got the intros, the test intros? Because they were hilarious. They so need to go out.
Probably. They'll be there.
Yeah, they were so funny. It was trying to do the intro bit and yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, because we were trying. I remember. Vicky will tell you a funny story, but she won't at the moment because she's got the flu. But she'll say that when I was first trying to do intros, she would see me doing this. I'd talk with my hands, because it actually raised the energy. So rather than sitting there going, hi and welcome to the Full Stop podcast, it's like, hi and welcome to the Full Stop podcast. And it just made the whole difference. But she would stand at the door here and just laugh her head off.
They're all hard though, aren't they? I find whenever you've asked me to do like an intro for an episode, and I'm the least, I probably featured the least as the intros to the episodes, because I'm like, I don't know what to, I don't know what to say. And then I get a bit kind of like BBC. It's like, hello, this is live from Broadcasting House. I'm not saying like that, although I go a bit Olivia Colman. And yeah, and the Instagram, I did an Instagram live on Friday. Can I just say this, because I feel so adult and brave? Forget the accounts that you're doing with Daniel, Sarah. I did Instagram live. And I was like, oh my God, this is more terrifying than the podcast. And I was like, oh, I put my brave pants on. I did an Instagram live. Go and look at it, people, because I was brave. Anyway, Charlotte, you have a question, my darling.
I do. Firstly, I just want to say congratulations on your 5 years. And I'm so glad I found this community because it's made me feel so included and so seen. And my question was actually about the outro for your episodes, where you finish by saying, you know, it's important that people don't feel alone. And I'm wondering, was that always the way you wanted to end the episodes? Because you talked about how you were starting them, but I really resonate with that. It's kind of I get goosebumps whenever I listen to an episode, and that's how it finishes. And so I just wondered, why you made that decision to end that way.
Oh,
Michael, over to you.
I think I did the first one and just did that, and it's just stuck ever since. I don't think we've actually, of course, the statement's implicit in everything that we do, but yeah, we never actually said, I don't know if that's a spoiler, but we never actually set out to do it that way. But yeah, I think I did the first one, and just, yeah, there you go. Put it in there, and it seemed to have stuck.
Yeah.
They're even on our comments that we have as well. I think I think you did it, and I think I think university, I think, not you, Sarah, but I just thought that works. I couldn't think of a better word. I couldn't think of a better way to end it. And I think the ending of something, I just love. I hope that they're positive and goosebumps that you have. I don't say that they're positive goosebumps, but they're good feels that you have there at the end of the episode, because I think that matters. That not that people necessarily are left wanting more from us, but that there's a natural close to something, and then the next journey will begin. But actually, there is always a journey with the podcast. That each episode kind of sort of sequentially sort of follows itself, I think. And it was just a beautiful question and a really, really interesting one. Thank you, Charlotte. I loved it. Because I hadn't thought about the end before, just that it is the end. And usually what I think about the end is I'm doing transcripts and trying to go through something. Oh, thank God we got to that bit. Because I've reached the end of the transcript. I've become that analytical and robotic, but it's made me think, okay, I'm going to pay more attention to that. Thank you.
No, I think, Michael, you just riffed it, didn't you? And it just basically, I think everyone has had that experience when you first come to being childless, however it is that you get here, of feeling like you're the only person doing it. You're the only one that actually has ever experienced this in life. And I think when you said it, I don't know if you said it in the episode, but I remember listening to the outro and going, oh, you have fucking nailed that. And I think that's why we've kept it, because it's just like, it's the chef's kiss, isn't it? It's like, yes, nailed it. So yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Charlotte. Elaine, put your hand up.
I was just going to say, I was fantastic, Charlotte, because I was going to say that too. I just love that saying, you are not alone, because I think that, for me, I think it's a pure genius. It's what we're all here for, isn't it? To know we're not alone, and it just completely sums it up. But I was going to say about the intro music as well. I love it. And as soon as it plays, I feel just feel comfortable, and it feels like a big warm blanket snuggling you up, and you're okay to settle down for a little while and you're safe. Love it.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear too. It's kind of interesting because we've had conversations about the music and about how things are, and I'm not going to nerd out too much here at all. But I was thinking about how things like about branding, which is a bit boring, and I won't talk about it too much because I think maybe it's its own kind of conversation, but about how there's a synchronicity to things as well. So from the way the music starts, the words that we use. And when it got to Story House last year, and we knew we wanted to take some things so people had something to take away with them, it was like kind of like a memory, I suppose, of the event, but also to know that in those weeks after something happens, whether that's Story House or any other event that we might go to, that there is something to keep, because it can be tough those days afterwards when you've been surrounded by love and then turfed out into the real world, bizarrely into a Morris Men convention that was going on in Chester for me, and it was weird, and I walked back into the theatre and thought that was just odd. Anyway, but generally going back into life when you had that space, it's been so empowering, and then you kind of like, oh, I hear the triggers again, and then you've got to sit and readjust back to that. It's like the lights go on at the end of the disco and you realize who you've been dancing with and they weren't who you thought they were. And I kind of think that is important to us, that the messaging that we have, the words we use, are things actually, I know that the brand stands up, visually there's some changes, but it does because actually creating the cars that we took to Story House, creating the resources, and we've got another resource that I'm working on right now, actually, that Sarah's written and I'm doing the design stuff for. They're easy to do because the words flow. It just, and given it wasn't structured, and so the website still got all the old kind of podcast covers on, and I've really got to go through and update them at some point. But there wasn't a plan for that. I didn't have a logo. I did it none of the ways I would do. If someone came to me and said, I've got this idea for a podcast, I want you to do the design and the branding and the website for it, I would not do it the way that we've done it, because we didn't expect to be here in 5 years. We didn't have that plan going forward. It has been so organic. And I guess probably I kind of get into a closing point. I don't mean to put this in right now, but I just say, just do it. There's a whole article that I have on my Hello Lovely website, my other guys, which is launch the damn thing. Because at the end of the day, launch it, see where it lands. If it doesn't work, try something else, but play around with ideas. Don't let it hold you back. And if you are listening to thinking, I've got a story and I want to go on the Full Stop podcast, or I'd like to go into the online community, but I'm not too sure whether I want to hang around in it all the time, but give it a go. Just try it out, see what it's like. Come and, email us and just say, look, I've got an idea for an episode. I think it could be this. And just be brave and do that. It's fine. We're here to support you. But, try it out. Play around with it. If it doesn't suit, it doesn't suit. But, do it. You never know where it ends up. We didn't expect to be here in 5 years, and here we are. And, yeah, it's got a bit adulty lately. We're okay. Sort of. A bit scary.
So
Yeah.
Elaine, there was some rumblings about should we change the music? But obviously that wouldn't be a good move for us. So we take that on board.
Yeah, I think that's really important, that we listen to the feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you said that, and a few other people have said that too, we were like, okay, yeah. And that's kind of when it actually dawned on me, when that came back, because the music is part of our brand. It's part of who we are. We don't listen to it so much because we record it and it adds on later. And I always listen to the podcast back anyway. Then I've listened to it and I've done the next one. So to me, from us, it's kind of weird because we're kind of, we're not on the outside in, we're on the inside. Whatever. That's like some hokey-cokey kind of dance I'm doing there in my head. It makes sense to me in my mind. Don't worry about it.
Can I ask where the music comes from?
It's actually royalty-free music that So I think I was the person who went in and looked at some of the royalty-free music, and I was flicking, Berenice and Sarah and you'd get back, oh, yuck, oh, no. And, yeah, we just landed on that one.
Can I just add something at the end as well? Because in Chester, we took a load of these up. And I just want to acknowledge Vicky and Michael and how much work they put into creating things for us ad hoc. I think Vicky, I can't remember how many she brought over, Michael, along with the Tim Tams. It was a lot. And I thought they were so beautiful. And we were able to, well, we got early dibs, didn't we? I was like, oh, having that one. But she put so much hard work into it. And when we were in Chester, all the bits and bobs that came out, you know, a lot of that was done with Vicky, who is just so creative. And I just wanted to say a big thank you, because she may not be visible, but she is a big part of the stuff that we do. So thank you, Vicky.
Yes, huge thank you. Sarah was holding up one of our full stop hugs, which is the little hearts, and they are a gift that we give out to all of our online community members when they join us, along with other goodies as well. So one of the things that you can get in the online space. And I can remember we were standing in the Welsh village somewhere, and with the box of them and glue guns. Wasn't there a trip to somewhere in Wales for a hot glue gun? I can't remember now. That was
there was. I know it was. I think it was a B&Q in Chester.
Places we go to, you know, the efforts.
This is the exotic places.
Oh yeah, we know where they are. I think weird places we recorded the podcast from as well. I haven't always recorded the podcast from here, but yeah, on holidays and finding somewhere, a desk space somewhere to record the podcast, or not having Wi-Fi, things like that happen. There you go, the challenges of.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Any closing questions or anything else you'd like to ask us? Because I've got to go and skedaddle for a lunch date. Someone who someone's crazy enough to invite me out. I mean, my God, anything could happen, really.
Yeah. Well, have fun.
I will.
Don't talk to strangers.
Try not to. I don't like them talking to me, to be fair.
Are you going somewhere posh?
I'm going to, and Michael's Googled it already. It's where are we going? I'm going with Elaine, I'll be honest. I'm going out for lunch with
lovely. Oh, how lovely.
I know. We are going to take over the pub and be very, very kind of us. Matching green.
Oh.
It's a pub called the Checkers, and I've already chosen the dessert, Elaine, just so you know.
Always dessert first, isn't it?
Is that halfway between the two of you?
I wonder if I can get a tiramisu to take away just for us. Anyway, I can eat it somewhere down the M11 in a lay-by.
I've given you a desert island disc to play on the way.
I know, I saw. I'm going to try and do that. My phone isn't connecting to the radio in my car and I'm getting cross with it. But if I can get it to work, then I will do so. If not, I will listen to it this evening. I'm getting through them. But I started at the beginning and they're so funny. Royal chap. it's really interesting. Well, at least we don't do that on the podcast. But you're going to have to get those things out. I want the recording things with the other music on. We're going to have to find those and play those. I think they're going to have to go onto the website. Or
okay. I've just street viewed the Checkers.
Thanks.
And when I show this to Vicky, she is going to be very jealous.
Oh no! Oh. Is it absolutely gorgeous?
Is it?
Well, you got to remember. We're looking at it as an Australian, so it's an old pub that faces the village green, and so
wow.
I know she's going to be very jealous.
I do have to.
I'll take her in September.
Oh, that is lovely. I've Googled it now as well.
You're Googling when we're going for lunch. No way, honestly, really. Right, I'm going to go and skedaddle.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
So much. Bye, guys.
Good to see you all.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Thanks Thanks for listening. We hope you found our conversation interesting, amusing, and sometimes as emotional as we did. We'd love to hear from you if you found this discussion engaging, or you have any questions about the podcast or the online community. If you'd like to find out more about our podcast, or you have a great idea for a topic we've not yet covered, or you just want to know a bit more about, we'd love to hear from you. We want this podcast to have as many voices from across our community as possible, so if something's missing or you just want a deeper dive on it, let us know. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. You can also become a member of our new online community, which is safe and inclusive space for anyone that's a member of the Childless community. More details are available on our website at www.thefullstoppod.com. You can also sign up to our listeners list at the website, which keeps you up to date on what we're up to, and if you'd like to, you can also donate to our work. As always, it's important to remember, you're not alone.
I used to work in Harlow, and I can remember one night we had some guests over. This is when I worked for a publishing company, big publishing company, and their offices, one of their satellite offices was there. And we took these people out to the bowling alley, and I was waiting for a taxi to get me to the railway station or something like that. I forget what I was doing. And I stood there, looked up and thought, I'm in the bus station at Harlow, standing outside a strip joint. And I was like, what am I doing here? This is one of the weirdest things of my life. Anyway, there you go. That's what I remember about it. But yes, there is the Henry Moore Foundation there, and that's definitely worth going to. For the lovely
menu. The menu sounds amazing. I've just Googled the menu.
Yeah, I know. I know. I'm going to take pictures. We're going to take pictures of all of the food, and we're going to share it with you.
Brilliant. Good.